Bourgeon and shoved it in her husband's face. "Look, this is Papa Twan, and it's like looking at Hunter's face. Our son is just a throwback, and you're a jackass," Brenda said, and helped herself to another beer. After that, the olive cast of Hunt's skin, his black brows and high cheekbones, the same piercing gaze as the man from the photo, and the distinctive Roman nose were no longer an issue for Chuck. But Chuck and Brenda were a big issue for Hunt, and 50% of the conflict in which he and Lainie were caught. Tonight, the windows were shut because of the rain. But since their air conditioning hadn't worked for months, his shirt was sticking to his body. Finally, he got up and went out onto the back porch. Rain was blowing in under the overhang, but he didn't care. His clothes were already wet with sweat, and it felt cool on his skin. He wanted to call Lainie. He just needed to hear her voice. But it was dinner time at the Mayes house, and nobody was allowed to take their phones to the table. So he stood in the rain while the war inside the house waged on without him. Lainie Mayes was the epitome of Southern charm. Well-groomed, well-dressed, always polite, born blessed with a beautiful oval-shaped face, long auburn hair that lay in waves, eyes as green as her daddy's money, and what Hunt referred to as kissable lips. The top of her head fit exactly beneath the curve of his chin. He was the last piece of her puzzle. That one missing bit that made her whole. Tonight, she was sitting at the dinner table, quietly and politely awaiting the first course, and listening to her parents, Greg and Tina's oh-so-proper conversation. But she could tell they didn't love each other anymore. She often wondered if they ever had. Mama had just been a sorority girl at Tulane University who scored a rich man's son, a classic match straight out of the Old South. But Lainie's defiant stance regarding Hunter Gray infuriated them. No matter what, she refused to knuckle under to their demands. She and Hunt saw each other and dated each other and tried to let their father's war roll over their heads. The fact that she and Hunt were now going to be attending the same university made Greg angry and Tina fret. On a good day, they offered her bribes to quit him. On a bad day, they threatened to disinherit her. But Lainie held a hand they didn't know about, and one they couldn't beat. She was 3 months pregnant with Hunter Gray's baby, and less than a month away from college. In 2 days, she would turn 18, the legal age for marriage without parental consent in Louisiana, and they would already be at college before she began to show. It would afford them the distance they needed to escape the lifelong hate of their father's feud. He had his scholarship, and she had the trust fund her grandmother Sarah Mayes left her, which would be hers when she turned 18. They'd have each other and the rest of their lives. When she first suspected she was pregnant, she panicked and put off telling Hunt because she was afraid of the consequences it would cause in both families. Then, a couple of weeks ago, she'd begun spotting and thought she'd lost the baby. But after the spotting stopped and she missed her 3rd period, she bought another pregnancy test and used it. The baby was still there. She was happy, but time had crept up on her, and Hunt needed to know. They'd planned to meet tonight, and then the storm came through. So, then her plan was to call him after dinner, but her phone was upstairs in her room. So here she sat, listening to the rain drowning out the drone of her parents' voices, and speaking only when spoken to until dinner was over. At that point, she laid down her napkin and looked up from her plate. "Thank you for dinner. I'm going to my room," she said, and stood up without waiting to be excused and left the table. The moment she closed the door behind her, she went to get her phone. She always tucked it beneath the chocolate-brown teddy bear Hunt had given her on Valentine's Day, but when she thrust her hand beneath the bear, the phone was gone. Frowning, she began looking around the room, trying to remember if she'd moved it, when the door to her room flew open. Her mother was standing in the doorway with a look on her face Lainie had never seen before, and she was holding Lainie's phone. "Are you looking for this?" Tina asked.